$350 to the full bidder, $375 and liability against you, $400.
On Saturday, March 31st, Swann will hold the 5th annual Space Exploration Sale. This sale will contain approximately 400 lots at auction. We have a broad array of items in this particular sale. It's one of the largest and most diversified sales of space exploration that we've had. As we have had in previous sales, we have items from Dr. Buzz Aldrin, Fred Hayes, and Paul Weitz. We are also fortunate to have some items from the estate of Apollo 15 astronaut Jim Irwin. The largest part of the sale includes the first part of the Ed Rees collection. This gentleman spent almost 30 years collecting a large array of material from the space race. Models, autographs, posters. If you can think of it, he had it. And I was fortunate enough to spend a lot of time reviewing his collection and picking out the key things for this first part of this sale. Swann is planning to have the second part of the Rees collection offered next year. The Ed Rees collection really encompasses the space race. We have a lot of material that was made and manufactured based on the activities of the United States and the Soviet Union at the time between the 1950s and the 1960s. We have a large collection of unbuilt models in the original boxes. These are highly sought after. They are from the flight programs of the 1950s and 1960s, and the manufacturers include well-known names such as Revell, Monogram, Adams, Lindbergh, and various others. These are going to be very, very sought after. As in previous sales, we have a large collection of philatelic or stamp-related material. Now, the significance of this is, especially on envelopes, individuals can have a stamp postmarked on a date significant to a flight event of the space program, such as a launch date, a lunar landing date, or a splashdown or recovery date. It's quite common to find a cachet or an image on that particular envelope relating to the subject matter. This particular sale has a first day cover canceled on the launch day of John Glenn's Mercury flight on February 20th, 1962, and this cover has actually been signed by all 7 of the original Mercury 7 astronauts. Most of these signatures are in their full name, which is quite rare. Leroy Gordon Cooper, Jr., John H. Glenn, Jr., M. Scott Carpenter, D.K. Slayton, Alan B. Shepard, Jr., Walter M. Schirra, Jr., and Gus Grissom. This next lot is very interesting. It is a diagram of the Apollo Command Module instrument panel. It has been signed by several astronauts, and including the signature, each astronaut has written his actual mission number and the actual Command Service Module number itself of the vehicle he flew in. This is a very long panel diagram, and it's a very early period piece. It's actually so early that several of the components had not yet been finished or laid out completely, and several of the actual panel areas are blank. It does include several key instruments such as the guidance computer, the launch vehicle engine numbers and lighting panels, the abort control modes, and various knobs and switches. This next lot is very fascinating. It's an actual lunar mission profile diagram. What it does, it lists over 90 key steps that are involved for a lunar mission. Not only that, key astronauts from various flights have actually signed this particular chart and added various phrases. Several of the inscriptions include, like from Buzz Aldrin, first lunar landing. From Fred Hayes, planned 3rd lunar landing, but boom, that refers to the oxygen tank explosion on the service module. First limb to lunar orbit, Tom Stafford, Apollo 10. And first Apollo flight, Walter Cunningham, Apollo 7. Now the key diagrams or key steps in this profile include the launch sequence to Earth orbit, the trans-lunar injection, the separation of the command service module to turn around and dock with the lunar module, the coast and any mid-course corrections needed to go to the moon, the lunar orbit insertion, and the actual lunar landing. And probably the most important thing, at least from an astronaut's point of view, is the entry into the Earth's atmosphere and a safe landing, or splashdown actually, in the Pacific Ocean. One of the key autograph lots in this cell is a signed crew picture of the Apollo 1 astronauts, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee. It is significant with this particular cell because 40 years ago, on January 27, 1967, the tragic Apollo 1 fire occurred. It is 40 years later that this autograph photograph has become available. For collecting autographs, it's most desirable to have a complete crew. Normally, it's fairly easy to obtain certain crew signatures because most flights go as planned and the crew returns and are available to sign autographs. For the Apollo 1 crew, however, that was never the opportunity. Due to the fire happening fairly early in the flight program, the crew themselves were busy in planning stages. This was the first manned Apollo flight, and their time was extremely limited due to test and mission planning. The opportunity to get all three astronauts to sign a particular item was quite rare. So an item like this is highly sought after just due to its pure rarity and the unfortunate association with history with the first crew loss of the American space program. As in previous cells, we do have flown flags from Apollo missions. In particular, we have a flag flown on the Apollo 7 flight, the first time Swann has been able to offer a flag from that particular mission. This is a 4x6-inch silk flag on a signed letter by Apollo 7 Commander Wally Schirra. This particular flag from Apollo 7 is actually certified by astronaut Schirra on the flag. On the lowest white bar, he has written "Flown on Apollo 7, SC or Spacecraft 101" and signed his name, Wally Schirra. This particular flag comes from the collection of Harriet Isley, who was the wife of Apollo 7 astronaut Don Isley. Collecting interest in flown flags from any manned flight has a patriotic aspect to it, and that's what makes one aspect of the desirability for flags. Now, on a more limited basis, individual flags from the 50 states were carried. Those are highly desirable, most particular from individual residents from those particular states. The items from Dr. Aldrin's collection from the Apollo 11 mission are probably the most sought-after material offered at any space exploration cell, and Swann has had the privilege to offer several items from his collection over the past several years. One particular item is a lunar surface checklist page which contains actual notation made by Dr. Aldrin right after the first moonwalk. The side labeled SUR, which stands for Surface, -56, or page 56 of the manual, contains various steps that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin did to align the guidance and navigational platform prior to lunar liftoff. Dr. Aldrin has inscribed this particular sheet used by Neil and myself while on the lunar surface and signed that particular page. On the back side of this lunar surface checklist card labeled SUR-57, it actually has several data notes recorded by Dr. Aldrin after the first lunar moonwalk. In particular, there's an item called the LIM Consumables Update Data Box, which actually has some very interesting information. The actual ground elapsed time of the recorded data, the amount of propellants in the reaction control system in percentages left in these particular tanks, the O2 quantity in the descent stage, and for the batteries of both the descent and ascent stage, the amount of power remaining. One can actually look up in the air-to-ground transcripts from the Apollo 11 mission and actually see these particular numbers that were read down by Buzz Aldrin to Mission Control.